Now let's talk a little bit about accompanied recitative. Accompanied recitative is kind of a hybrid between the secco recitative and an aria. Why? Because in the secco recitative we have a lot of information that the characters are sharing. At the same time, you have just a few instruments that are accompanying this recitative, and so it's very flexible and very light. You'll have a harpsichord and maybe one or two other accompanying instruments, but they are very flexible, and it really is like chamber music, and they can adapt very quickly and easily to what's going on stage. With an aria, of course, you have a big orchestra, and so you need a conductor for that, and the singer is basically in some kind of a pattern, and it's not going to vary wildly. In an accompanied recitative, you have the best of both worlds. So you have a lot of information being given, like the secco recitativo, but you have a full orchestra to be able to manipulate. So, and you have to be as flexible as the 1, 2, or 3 musicians used in secco recitative, except you have the full orchestra to command. So that's why accompanied recitative is particularly difficult for conductors, and that's why we're going to talk about it today. Now let's go to something which is a concrete example of accompanied recitativo, and this is something that you can find in a lot of the conducting competitions, and also if you're going to enter into some of the opera houses, they might ask for this particular excerpt, which is from the Magic Flute, and it's the Sprechersehen. So you have Tamino and the priest during the finale of Act 1, and this is a brilliant example of accompanied recitative. So one of the first questions you have to ask yourself when you're going to study something like this kind of recitative is, who are my protagonists? Who are my characters in this scene, and what are their personalities? Because you have something which is found in drama and theater all the time, which is a kind of chiaroscuro of personalities. You have someone who is young and very tempestuous, and so he's very light and staccato. And then to contrast that, you might have someone else in the scene who's very old and measured and takes his time. And this is what we have, of course, in this particular scene. We have Tamino, who is the young one, and he's full of vim and vigor. And then you have the priest, who is a wonderful counterpart to Tamino's energy. He's very calm, wise, and measured. So this is the first thing that you want to see. Who is in the scene? The second thing is, when we start the scene, is it a net beginning of something new, or is it the tail end of what just went on before, and then a little bit later in the recitative it opens to something new? So is it a frank start, or is it a tail, like a coda to what just happened, and then in the beginning is a little bit advanced in the recitative scene? So that's another question. A third question you want to ask yourself is, what happens during the whole scene? Whenever you have a play, some kind of interaction between many characters, you want to know where they start out, who has the upper hand, who has the power in the scene, who has the energy, and who is kind of secondary or receiving and responding to the dominant energy. And then as you progress through the scene, what happens? Are people transformed, or do they basically stay static and true to their initial state? And you'll see that in this particular scene, Tamino does become affected by the priest and vice versa. So let's look at this very concretely. So we start off with Tamino. We had the little march, which is lovely, and then we have Die Weisheitslehre dieser Knaben sei ewig mir in Herz gegraben. So that means that he is commenting on what just happened, and he's telling you about his personal state, but it's not something new right away. It's also interesting that we start in the key of C major, but we really don't stay there at all. So technically this is in C major, but already we're starting the journey. And we're starting the journey to F major, but we don't stay there either. So we are in a period of discovery and of adventure for Tamino, and yet we do have to end the scene in the C major before we go to F major and beyond. Also, there's a different context between the orchestra's intervention the first time, which is an extension of Tamino's first thought. Die Weisheitslehre dieser Knaben sei ewig mir ins Herz gegraben. So this is just a harmonic extension of this first phrase, which is cut in two just for the moment. The second intervention of the orchestra is much different because we have a resolution to the F major, but then. So I would not suggest doing also. It should not be that easy. It's because then he says, wo bin ich nun? And then this is an extension of the harmonic turbulence that we just had. Was wird mit mir? Ist dies der Sitz der Götter hier? So we have to have that initial happiness. Wow, those wonderful three boys really gave me food for thought. They were wonderful. And then the switch to drama. Where am I? What's going to happen to me? And then, is this the seat of the gods here? And we don't know. We're suspended harmonically again. So it's very interesting. And this is a new section where we're thinking about something else. Now he's going to tell us what he's actually seeing. Es zeigen die Pforten, es zeigen die Zaunen, dass Klugheit und Arbeit und Künste hier weilen. Wo Tätigkeit thronet und müßig kein Galt, erhält seine Herrschaft das Last der mich leiht. So this was very kind of flowing, and the allegro is a continuation of his idea and talking about what he sees and what he imagines this place to be. And then he takes the allegro aside. Ich wage mich mutig zu Pforte hinein. Die Absicht ist edel und lauter und rein. Zittre feige Bösewicht. Pamina retten, ist mir Pflicht. So this is a great first section. We had a little bit of hesitancy before going to this appraisal of the surroundings and then imagining what it could be, getting courage, and going forth. So that's the end of the first section. Now this second section begins. And again, if you remember that in the Magic Flute, we always have 3. And 3 is a very holy number, and it can also be a Masonic number, and we have it everywhere, from the E flat major to 3 times knocking, etc. And I mention this now because we have 3 times these knocks on the door when we have zurück, zurück, and then the third time it's the right door and everything opens. So let's go into that a little bit now. Zurück, 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 so wage ich hier mein Glück. Zurück, auf hier ruft man zurück. Da sehe ich noch eine Tour, vielleicht finde ich den Eingang hier. So this is the end of Tamino's biorhythm, where he was propulsing everything forward, and it's an abrupt stop with the adagio because suddenly we're in a new realm, and the new realm is the priest's realm. Biorhythm is much slower. And this is why I think it's important to keep Tamino's energy until the declaration of A flat major. So we have and not to anticipate that before the A flat major. Wo willst du, kühne Fremdling hin? Was suchst du hier in Heiligtum? Der Lieb und Tun gehen Eigentum. So again, we have the andante, and the andante is no longer the biorhythm of the priest, which is so slow. It's Tamino. And it comes even before Tamino has a chance to answer. We have this. And then he comes, der Lieb. Then they start interacting. So the priest has declared himself and has set his biorhythm. Tamino is true to his. Now they're going to start to interact, and there's going to be a little bit of friction, right? So, die Worte sind von hohem Sinn. Allein, wie willst du diese finden? And now he's trying to scare Tamino a little bit, which is supported by what's happening in the orchestra. This is not just 1 and 2 and 3 and we're waiting and so on. We're creating drama within the orchestra, and we have to help the drama which is occurring on stage. So we have to be connected and cognizant of what's going on. So, allein, wie willst du diese finden? Dich leitet Lieb und Tugend nicht. And this is where he gets a little bit scary. Weil Tod und Rache dich entzünden. Nur rascher für den Bösewicht. But Tamino is right with him. So when kind of his collar comes up, the priest's collar comes up, and he's talking about death and hatred actually led you here, Tamino defends himself very much, and he says, well, I'm only seeking the villain. Right? Den wirst du wohl bei uns nicht finden. And exactly at this moment, Tamino is getting under the collar of the priest just a little bit. He's making him a little bit upset, but then the priest always settles down and tries to maintain control of his emotions. Of course, because Tamino hasn't gone through the trials yet, he is still a boy, let's say, with his emotions, contrary to the priest. So Tamino doesn't have control over his emotions, and the priest does 90% of the time. Sarastro herrscht in diesen Gründen, ja, ja, Sarastro herrscht hier, doch in dem Weisheitstempel nicht, herrscht im Weisheitstempel hier. So ist denn alles Heuchelei. So you can see here again that the priest has to be slow, whereas Tamino is impetuous. And this is why we have to pay attention so much to the prep beat, which will give you, with your speed, the speed of the entrance of the orchestra. So when it's the priest, ja, ja, Sarastro herrscht hier, doch in den Weisheitstempel nicht. Herrscht in Weisheitstempel hier. So the speed of the prep beat will dictate when the orchestra is coming in and what kind of character. Okay, and then we have everything is just hogwash. And then he's very upset. Willst du schon wieder gehen? Ja, ich will gehen, froh und frei, nie eure Tempel sehen. Again, slow, fast, the interior motion versus the exterior motion. Exteriorly, Tamino is very upset, and he says, yeah, I'm going to go, just like a teenager. Sure, I'm going to go. I'm going to be free, and I'm never going to see your temple again. But the interior emotion, which is portrayed by the orchestra, it's something completely different, right? Erklär dich näher mir, dich täuschet ein Betrug. Sarastro wohnet hier, das ist mir schon genug. Wenn du dein Leben liebst, so rede, bleibe da. This is a wonderful example of the priest kind of getting emotional, and he's bubbling a little bit. Wenn du, if you love your life, wenn du dein Leben liebst, so rede, and then there's piano in the orchestra, bleibe da. So he lost it for a little bit, and he says, if you value your life, you're going to stay here and not go and talk to me. And now, Sarastro hassest du? And this is on a 5/7. It's great because this is the big question. You hate Sarastro? Sarastro, who is the most holy of all? Ja, ich hasse ihn ewig. Ja, so gib mir deine Gründe an. Ist ein Unmensch, ein Tyrann. So he's saying again, I hate him because this is what he's saying. He's a horrible person. He's a tyrant. And then the priest comes back. Is that what you think? Where did you get your information from? And so he's trying to appeal to the reason and the logic that Tamino doesn't really have yet. He's just basing it off somebody else. So again, it's this power struggle of who has the upper hand, who is influencing whom, and who is transformed by whom. Now we've seen how the priest was disturbed by Tamino, but then he settles himself and is able to regain control. Let's see now how Tamino is transformed and he loses his energy temporarily. O ew'ge Nacht, wann wirst du schwinden? Was wird das Licht mein Auge finden? So this is the question that Tamino has, and he is completely lost in the everlasting night. And his question is, when will you lift this everlasting night? And when will my eyes finally see the light? And of course, then we have the second intervention when the chorus says, soon, little one, or not. And that is what propels him out of this temporary stasis of kind of hopelessness. And then he says, bald, 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 sagt ihr, oder nie? And then he's out of it and he's into his tempestuousness, but he is now with melancholy and more fire. Ihr Unsichtbaren saget mir, lebt denn Pamina noch? And then he gets the answer that he wants. Pamina, Pamina, lebet noch. Sie lebt, sie lebt. Ich danke euch dafür. Oh, wenn ich doch imstande wäre, Allmächtige, zu eurer Ehre, mit jedem Tone meiner Dank zu schildern, wie hier entsprang. So there we have Tamino getting back his energy and being completely hopeful once again and off once more to get his magic flute and to sing and to go through all these trials. And by the way, after this whole Sprecherzen is finished, we are once again in C major. We have completed a whole cycle, harmonically and otherwise and psychologically, of Tamino. Tamino has grown. He has grown in information. He knows much more than when he first started the scene. He also has grown perhaps a little bit in maturity. He has come into contact with the priest. The priest has tested him and he's come out triumphant, and he is more motivated than ever to go find and save his Pamina.